Marcus Johnson lived a simple life. He was a black farmer in his late 40s, living on a piece of land that had been in his family for generations. His farm sat at the edge of a small town, surrounded by rolling fields and endless skies. It wasn't much, but to Marcus it was everything. The soil beneath his boots, the smell of fresh hay, and the sound of birds chirping in the morning were all reminders of the hard work his father, and his father's father, had put into this place. For Marcus, farming wasn't just a job, it was a way of life. Every day, Marcus woke up before sunrise to tend to his crops and animals. But there was one constant companion who never left his side: Diesel. Diesel was a German shepherd with a shiny coat and sharp eyes that seemed to see right through people. To Marcus, Diesel wasn't just a dog. He was family. The bond between them was unbreakable. Whether Marcus was fixing fences or working in the fields, Diesel was always nearby, watching over him like a loyal guardian. The days passed quietly. On the farm, Marcus didn't have many visitors except for an occasional neighbor stopping by to borrow tools or share a cup of coffee. Life was predictable, peaceful even, but sometimes, when Marcus looked out at the horizon, he couldn't shake the feeling that something big was coming. He didn't know what it was, but deep down he felt like change was on the wind. One evening, as the sun began to set, casting golden light across the fields, Marcus noticed something unusual. A group of vehicles was parked near the edge of his property. They weren't the kind of cars you'd expect to see around here, no rusty pickups or old tractors. These were sleek black SUVs with tinted windows. Marcus frowned. He didn't recognize them, and they definitely didn't belong to any of his neighbors. Curious, Marcus grabbed his flashlight and whistled for Diesel. The dog trotted over immediately. His ears perked up, sensing that something was off. Together, they walked toward the strange vehicles. As they got closer, Marcus could make out several figures standing near the cars. They wore plain clothes, but their body language gave them away. They weren't farmers or locals. Something about them screamed authority. "Can I help you?" Marcus called out, his voice steady despite the unease growing in his chest. One of the men stepped forward. He was tall, with broad shoulders and a stern expression. "Who are you?" the man demanded, his tone sharp and accusatory. "This is my farm," Marcus replied calmly. "I live here. What are you doing on my property?" The man didn't answer. Instead, he glanced around as if searching for something or someone. Behind him, another figure muttered something under their breath, but Marcus couldn't quite catch it. Diesel growled softly, his hackles rising. The tension in the air was thick enough to cut with a knife. Marcus tried again. "If you're lost or need directions, I can help you. But if you're here for something else, I'd appreciate an explanation." The man who had spoken earlier narrowed his eyes. "We're conducting an investigation," he said finally. "Stay out of our way." Marcus blinked, surprised. An investigation? On his farm? That didn't make sense. He hadn't done anything wrong, and neither had anyone else on his property. Still, he nodded slowly, trying to keep things calm. "All right," he said. "Just let me know if you need anything." But the man wasn't listening anymore. His gaze shifted to Diesel, who was still growling lowly. "Control your dog," the man snapped. Marcus hesitated. Diesel wasn't aggressive, he was just protective. And given the situation, Marcus couldn't blame him for being on edge. Before he could say anything, though, another voice rang out. "Shut that dog up," someone shouted. Everything happened so fast after that. One moment Marcus was standing next to Diesel, trying to reassure him. The next, there was a deafening crack. A gunshot. Time seemed to freeze as Marcus watched Diesel crumple to the ground, blood spreading quickly across the dirt. "No!" Marcus screamed, dropping to his knees beside his beloved companion. Diesel whimpered weakly, his eyes wide with pain and confusion. Marcus clutched the dog's head in his hands, tears streaming down his face. "Diesel, no, please, stay with me." The officers stood frozen, some looking shocked, others indifferent. No one moved to help, no one said a word. The only sound was Marcus's anguished cries echoing through the quiet fields. In that moment, Marcus felt like his entire world had shattered. Diesel wasn't just a dog, he was a part of Marcus's soul. Losing him felt like losing a piece of himself. But what hurt even more was the complete lack of remorse from the people who had caused this tragedy. They had shot Diesel without warning, without reason. And now, Marcus was left to pick up the pieces of his broken heart as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and red. Marcus realized that nothing would ever be the same again. This was supposed to be his safe haven, his sanctuary. But now it felt like a battlefield. And as he knelt there, holding Diesel's lifeless body, Marcus vowed that he wouldn't let this injustice go unanswered. Whatever it took, he would fight back. For Diesel, for himself, and for everyone else who had been treated unfairly because of the color of their skin. The night stretched on, silent and heavy with grief. But somewhere deep inside, Marcus knew this was only the beginning. The gunshot that killed Diesel echoed across the fields, leaving a silence so heavy it felt like the earth itself was holding its breath. Marcus knelt on the ground, his hands trembling as he cradled Diesel's limp body. Blood soaked into his shirt and jeans, but he didn't care. All he could think about was the lifeless eyes staring up at him, the same eyes that had once sparkled with loyalty and love. His heart ached like it had been ripped out of his chest. The officers stood frozen, their faces unreadable. Some looked away, unable to meet Marcus's gaze, while others shifted uncomfortably, as if unsure what to do next. The man who had fired the shot, the one who had barked orders moments earlier, lowered his weapon slowly. He glanced at his colleagues, then back at Marcus, but no apology came, no explanation. Just silence. Marcus's tears blurred his vision, but his voice cut through the stillness like a knife. "Why?" he demanded, his tone raw with pain and disbelief. "What did he do? He wasn't hurting anyone." No one answered. Instead, the officer who seemed to be in charge stepped forward again. "We're conducting an operation," he said firmly, though there was a flicker of unease in his eyes. "You need to leave this area immediately." Marcus stared at him, incredulous. "This is my land," he said, his voice rising. "I'm not going anywhere. You just killed my dog for no reason. What kind of operation gives you the right to come onto private property and shoot someone's pet?" The officer clenched his jaw. "Sir, I suggest you calm down. We're here because we have credible information suggesting illegal activity may be taking place on this property. If you interfere, you'll be arrested." Marcus couldn't believe what he was hearing. Illegal activity? On his farm? It was absurd. For years he had worked tirelessly to keep this place running, following every rule, paying every tax. And now these strangers were accusing him of something without even asking questions or showing proof. Diesel's death replayed in Marcus's mind over and over again. The sharp crack of the gunshot, the way Diesel's body had fallen so suddenly, it all felt surreal, like a nightmare he couldn't wake up from. But this wasn't a dream. This was real. These men had come onto his property, assumed the worst, and ended a life without hesitation. Credible information? Marcus spat, his anger boiling over. From who? Who told you that? Did you even check before coming here? Or did you just decide I must be guilty because of where I live and how I look? The accusation hung in the air, heavy and undeniable. The officers exchanged uneasy glances, some shifting uncomfortably under Marcus's piercing gaze. One of them muttered something under his breath, but Marcus caught it anyway. "This is why we shouldn't waste time on farms like this." Marcus froze. Farms like this. The words hit him like a punch to the gut. So that was it. They hadn't come here because they truly believed he was involved in something illegal. They had come here because of prejudice, because he was black, because he lived in a rural area, because stereotypes painted people like him as suspicious or dangerous. None of it made sense, but none of it surprised him either. For a moment, Marcus considered arguing further, demanding answers, refusing to let them walk away without accountability. But looking at the guns in their hands, the cold expressions on their faces, he realized how futile it would be. He was outnumbered, outgunnaged, and completely powerless against their authority. All he could do was stand there, clutching Diesel's body, and hoped that somehow, someday, justice would find its way to him. As the officers began moving around the property, searching for whatever phantom evidence they thought existed, Marcus stayed rooted to the spot. Every step they took felt like another blow to his dignity. They rummaged through his barn, inspected his equipment, and even poked around his house, all without permission or explanation. Each second dragged on endlessly, each movement a reminder of how little control he had over his own life. Finally, after what felt like hours, the group gathered near their vehicles. The lead officer approached Marcus one last time. "We're done here," he announced curtly. "If you don't want any more trouble, stay out of our way." Marcus didn't respond. He simply watched as they climbed into their SUVs and drove off, leaving him alone with Diesel's body and a broken spirit. The sound of their engines faded into the distance, but the weight of what had happened remained, pressing down on him like a mountain. Night fell quickly, blanketing the farm in darkness. Marcus carried Diesel's body to the shed, laying him gently on a pile of old blankets. He lit a lantern and sat beside him, staring at the empty space where his loyal companion used to lie. Memories flooded his mind. Diesel bounding across the fields, barking playfully at squirrels, resting his head on Marcus's lap during quiet evenings. How could someone take that away so cruelly? But as much as Marcus wanted to wallow in his grief, he knew he couldn't. Something inside him stirred, a flicker of determination, a spark of defiance. These officers might have thought they could intimidate him, silence him, erase him. But they were wrong. Marcus wasn't the kind of man to back down when faced with injustice. He had fought too hard for this farm, for his family, for his future, to let them win. By the time dawn broke, Marcus had made up his mind. He wouldn't let Diesel's death go unanswered. He wouldn't let fear or anger consume him. Instead, he would channel his pain into action. He would tell the world what had happened here, not just for himself, but for everyone who had ever been treated unfairly because of the color of their skin or where they came from. With Diesel's memory etched deeply in his heart, Marcus walked back to the farmhouse. He picked up the phone, his hand still shaking slightly, and dialed a number he'd seen on flyers at the local community center. It was a civil rights organization, one that helped victims of police brutality fight for justice. As the line rang, Marcus took a deep breath. He knew this was only the beginning of a long and difficult journey, but he also knew he wasn't alone. People cared, people listened, and together they could make a difference. The next morning, Marcus woke up to a world that felt heavier than it had the day before. The sun rose over the fields as it always did, painting the sky in soft hues of orange and pink. But for Marcus, the beauty of the sunrise was lost. His heart still ached with the absence of Diesel, and the injustice of what had happened weighed on him like an invisible chain. He couldn't shake the image of those officers driving away, leaving him broken and defeated. Determined not to let his grief consume him, Marcus stepped outside to face the day. As he walked across the farm, he noticed something unusual. His neighbors were gathered near the edge of his property. At first he thought they might be there to check on him after the commotion from the night before, but as he got closer, he realized their presence meant something bigger. "Marcus," one of them called out, waving him over. It was Sarah, a middle-aged woman who lived down the road. She had tears in her eyes as she approached him. "We heard about Diesel. I'm so sorry." Marcus nodded silently, unsure of what to say. Word traveled fast in small towns like this, but he hadn't expected news of the shooting to spread overnight. One by one, his neighbors came forward, offering hugs, condolences, and words of support. Some brought food, others promised to help, with whatever he needed. Their kindness touched him deeply, but it also reminded him of how much Diesel had meant to everyone, not just to him. As the crowd grew, so did the conversation. People began sharing their own frustrations with law enforcement, recounting stories of unfair treatment or unwarranted suspicion. A young man named James spoke up, his voice trembling with anger. "This isn't right, Marcus. They can't just come onto your land and do this without consequences. We need to stand together." The idea took root quickly. Someone suggested, organizing a protest to demand answers and accountability. Others agreed, and soon plans were underway. Flyers were printed, phone calls made, and social media posts shared. Within hours, the story of Diesel's death, and the alleged drug operation that led to it, had reached far beyond the boundaries of the small town. By midday, reporters arrived at Marcus's farm. Cameras flashed, microphones were thrust into his face, and questions flew at him from every direction. At first, Marcus felt overwhelmed. He wasn't used to being in the spotlight, and the attention made him uneasy. But then he remembered why he was doing this: for Diesel, for justice, for change. Taking a deep breath, he stepped forward to address the growing crowd. "I didn't ask for any of this," Marcus began, his voice steady despite the storm of emotions inside him. "All I wanted was to live peacefully on my farm, take care of my animals, and work hard like I've always done. But last night everything changed. These officers came onto my property without cause, killed my dog, and treated me like I was guilty of something I didn't do. That's not justice. That's not fair." His words resonated with everyone present. Applause broke out, followed by chants of "Justice for Diesel" and "End police brutality." Marcus felt a surge of hope for the first time since the tragedy. Maybe, just maybe, this could lead to something meaningful. Meanwhile, back at the police station, things weren't going well for the officers involved in the raid. News of the botched operation had already leaked internally, sparking heated debates among the team. Some argued that firing at Diesel had been excessive and unnecessary, while others defended the decision, claiming the dog posed a threat. Tensions ran high, and trust between colleagues began to fray. Then came the first sign of trouble. One of the junior officers, visibly shaken by the events of the previous night, submitted his resignation letter. In it, he admitted feeling pressured to follow orders he didn't agree with and expressed guilt over Diesel's death. His departure sent shockwaves through the department, raising uncomfortable questions about leadership and accountability. Around the same time, technical issues started cropping up during the investigation. Equipment that had worked perfectly fine earlier suddenly malfunctioned. Radios crackled with static, laptops froze mid-task, and files went missing. Officers scrambled to fix the problems, but nothing seemed to work. It was almost as if the operation itself had been cursed. Adding to the chaos, a key piece of evidence, a supposed tip-off from an informant, turned out to be unreliable. When questioned further, the informant admitted exaggerating details to avoid getting into trouble themselves. Without solid proof to justify their actions, the entire case began falling apart. Back in the field, the search for illegal activity yielded nothing. Hours of combing through Marcus's property produced no drugs, no weapons, and no signs of wrongdoing. The officers returned empty-handed, their frustration mounting. For many of them, the mission now felt pointless, a colossal waste of time and resources. As days passed, the fallout continued. Public pressure mounted, fueled by widespread outrage over Diesel's death. Protesters marched through the streets, holding signs and chanting slogans. Social media exploded with hashtags like "Justice for Diesel" and "Ours Accountability Now," drawing national attention to the case. Civil rights organizations joined the fight, pledging to support Marcus in his quest for justice. Amidst all the noise, Marcus found himself reflecting on the strange turn of events. From the moment Diesel was shot, it seemed like everything had spiraled out of control, not just for him, but for the officers too. Their operation, once confident and calculated, had unraveled in ways no one could have predicted. Was it coincidence, or was it something more? One evening, as Marcus sat alone on his porch watching the sunset, he thought about karma. He didn't believe in revenge or punishment, but he couldn't ignore the irony of the situation. The same people who had wronged him were now facing consequences of their own making. Whether it was fate, divine intervention, or simply human error, Marcus saw it as a reminder that actions have repercussions. What goes around truly does come around. Despite the progress being made, Marcus knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. Seeking justice required patience, resilience, and courage, qualities he would need in abundance. But he also knew he wasn't fighting alone. His community stood beside him, united in their determination to hold those responsible accountable. In the quiet moments when the protests quieted and the cameras stopped rolling, Marcus allowed himself to grieve. He visited Diesel's resting place daily, leaving flowers and speaking softly to the memory of his loyal companion. Each visit brought a mix of sadness and gratitude, for the years they had shared, for the lessons Diesel had taught him, and for the strength he drew from honoring his legacy. By the end of the week, Marcus had transformed from a grieving farmer into a symbol of resistance. His story inspired others to speak out against systemic injustices, proving that even in the face of overwhelming odds, one person's voice could spark change. And though Diesel was gone, his spirit lived on, not just in Marcus's heart, but in the hearts of everyone who believed in justice. The days following Diesel's death brought a wave of change to Marcus's small town. What had started as a personal tragedy quickly grew into a movement, fueled by anger, grief, and a shared desire for justice. The community rallied around Marcus, determined to ensure that Diesel's death wouldn't be forgotten. For many, this wasn't just about one man and his dog. It was about standing up against the systemic injustices faced by marginalized communities everywhere. Every morning, Marcus woke up to find new supporters gathered outside his farmhouse. Some came bearing food or supplies, while others simply offered words of encouragement. Strangers from neighboring towns joined the cause too, traveling long distances to show their solidarity. It was overwhelming at times, but Marcus couldn't deny the power of unity. He realized he wasn't alone in this fight. An entire network of people stood ready to help him carry the weight. One afternoon, a group of activists arrived at the farm. They were part of a civil rights organization focused on police accountability and reform. Their leader, a woman named Lisa, introduced herself with a warm smile and firm handshake. "We've been following your story," she told Marcus. "You're not just fighting for Diesel, you're fighting for all of us. We want to help amplify your voice." With their guidance, Marcus began organizing protests and public events. Flyers were distributed across the county, urging people to join marches and demonstrations. Social media campaigns gained momentum, spreading Diesel's story far beyond the confines of the small town. Hashtags like Comrade Justice for Diesel and Stand with Marcus trended online, drawing attention from journalists, politicians, and even celebrities who voiced their support. The first major protest took place on a Saturday afternoon. Hundreds of people gathered in the town square, holding signs adorned with photos of Diesel and messages condemning police brutality. Children carried balloons shaped like paw prints, while elders held banners demanding accountability. The sight was powerful, a sea of faces united by a common purpose. Marcus stood at the center of it all, addressing the crowd with a mix of emotion and determination. "I never wanted any of this," he admitted, his voice trembling slightly. "All I wanted was to live peacefully on my farm with Diesel by my side. But when they killed him for no reason, they crossed a line. And now we have to stand up and say enough is enough." His words resonated deeply with the audience. Applause erupted, followed by chants of "No justice, no peace, and we won't back down." Tears streamed down Marcus's face as he looked out at the crowd. In that moment, he felt both vulnerable and invincible. Vulnerable because he missed Diesel so much it hurt to breathe, and invincible because he knew he had an army of supporters behind him. As the protest gained traction, pressure mounted on local authorities to address the incident. Calls for an internal investigation into the officer's conduct grew louder, forcing the police department to act. A task force was assembled to review the events leading up to Diesel's death, though skepticism lingered among activists and community members. Many feared the inquiry would be nothing more than a PR stunt, designed to placate the public without delivering real consequences. Despite these doubts, Marcus refused to let cynicism consume him. He attended every meeting, asked tough questions, and demanded transparency. With Lisa and her team by his side, he learned how to navigate the complicated world of legal proceedings and advocacy work. It was exhausting, but Marcus knew it was necessary. He owed it to Diesel and to himself to see this through. In addition to pushing for accountability, Marcus focused on honoring Diesel's memory in meaningful ways. He transformed part of his farm into a memorial site, planting flowers and setting up a wooden cross engraved with Diesel's name. Visitors often stopped by to pay their respects, leaving notes, toys, and tokens of remembrance tied to a nearby tree. Over time, the area became a symbol of resilience and hope, drawing people from all walks of life. But not everyone supported Marcus's efforts. Some residents believed the protests were stirring unnecessary trouble, arguing that law enforcement should be given the benefit of the doubt. Tensions flared during town hall meetings where heated debates broke out between those demanding justice and those defending the officers. Marcus listened patiently to both sides, understanding that fear and misunderstanding often drove such divisions. Still, he remained steadfast in his mission, refusing to compromise on what he believed was right. Amidst the chaos, Marcus found solace in reconnecting with nature. Working on the farm gave him a sense of purpose, reminding him of the values Diesel had embodied: loyalty, strength, and unwavering dedication. He spent hours tending to his crops, fixing fences, and caring for his remaining animals. Each task served as a form of therapy, helping him process his emotions while keeping Diesel's spirit alive. One evening, as Marcus sat on his porch watching the sunset, he reflected on how much had changed since Diesel's death. His quiet, predictable life had been turned upside down, replaced by a whirlwind of activism and advocacy. Yet, despite the challenges, he felt a profound sense of fulfillment. For the first time, he understood the true meaning of legacy, not just preserving memories of the past, but using them to create a better future. Lisa joined him on the porch, bringing 2 cups of steaming coffee. "How are you holding up?" she asked gently. Marcus sighed, taking a sip of the warm drink. "It's hard," he admitted. "Some days I feel like I'm drowning. But then I remember why I'm doing this. For Diesel, for justice, for everyone who deserves better. That keeps me going." Lisa nodded, placing a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "You're making a difference, Marcus. People are listening. Change takes time, but it's happening." Her words brought comfort, reinforcing Marcus's belief that he was on the right path. Together, they discussed plans for upcoming events, brainstorming ideas to keep the momentum going. By the time night fell, Marcus felt reinvigorated, ready to face whatever lay ahead. As weeks turned into months, the movement continued gaining ground. Schools invited Marcus to speak about his experience, teaching students about the importance of standing up against injustice. Local businesses donated funds to support his efforts, while artists created murals and songs inspired by Diesel's story. Everywhere Marcus went, he saw reminders of the impact his fight had made. Yet, even as progress unfolded, Marcus remained humble. He knew the journey wasn't over, not until real change occurred. Until then, he would keep pushing forward, carrying Diesel's memory in his heart and letting it guide his steps. Because in the end, justice wasn't just about punishing wrongdoing. It was about creating a world where tragedies like Diesel's death could never happen again. While Marcus and his supporters continued their fight for justice, strange things began happening within the police department. It was almost as if the universe itself had decided to intervene, tipping the scales in favor of those who had been wronged. The officers involved in Diesel's death found themselves facing consequences they never saw coming, consequences that seemed eerily connected to the choices they had made. The first sign of trouble came when Officer Harris, the man who had fired the fatal shot at Diesel, mysteriously resigned from the force. At first, no one knew why he had left so abruptly. Rumors swirled around the station, with some speculating that he couldn't handle the guilt, while others suggested he had received threats from activists. But the truth came out weeks later during a routine internal review. Someone leaked private messages Harris had sent to a colleague, confessing that he regretted pulling the trigger. "I didn't even think before I fired," he wrote. "It was instinct or maybe fear, but now I can't stop thinking about that dog's eyes." Harris wasn't the only one struggling. Another officer, Detective Miller, accidentally posted incriminating information online. In an attempt to defend himself against accusations of misconduct, Miller had joined a public forum discussing law enforcement ethics. What he didn't realize was that his account wasn't anonymous. When users pressed him for details about the operation on Marcus's farm, Miller revealed inconsistencies in the official narrative. He admitted that the raid had been based on shaky intelligence provided by an unreliable informant, a fact that hadn't been disclosed publicly until then. The revelation sent shockwaves through the community. Protesters seized on the admission, using it to highlight the recklessness of the operation. Journalists dug deeper, uncovering more flaws in the investigation. Equipment logs showed that key devices had malfunctioned during critical moments, leading to delays and miscommunication. Files containing evidence were incomplete or missing entirely, raising questions about whether proper protocols had been followed. Each new discovery chipped away at the credibility of the officers involved, turning what had once been a routine assignment into a full-blown scandal. Back at the station, morale plummeted. Officers who had initially defended their actions now distanced themselves from the case, fearing association with its failures. Whispers of karma echoed through the halls, though no one dared say it aloud. Some claimed the botched operation was punishment for overstepping boundaries. Others believed it was simply bad luck. Regardless of the explanation, one thing was clear. The very system meant to uphold justice had crumbled under the weight of its own mistakes. For Marcus, watching the unraveling of the police department brought mixed emotions. On one hand, he felt a sense of vindication. The same people who had treated him like a criminal without evidence were now facing scrutiny and accountability. Their arrogance and carelessness had caught up with them, exposing cracks in the foundation of authority they represented. But on the other hand, Marcus knew this wasn't about revenge. Diesel couldn't be brought back, and no amount of fallout could undo the pain of losing him. Still, seeing the truth come to light gave Marcus hope, not just for himself, but for anyone else who had ever been treated unfairly because of prejudice or bias. One evening, as Marcus sat alone in his kitchen, flipping through documents related to the case, he received a call from Lisa, the activist who had been guiding him through the legal process. Her voice was filled with excitement. "You're not going to believe this," she said. "We've got a whistleblower." Marcus leaned forward, his heart racing. "What do you mean?" Lisa explained that someone within the police department had come forward with explosive information. This person, whose identity remained confidential for safety reasons, claimed the entire drug raid had been based on false intelligence. The supposed tip-off, the reason officers had targeted Marcus's farm, had been fabricated by an informant, trying to avoid charges of their own. There had never been any credible evidence linking Marcus to illegal activity. The whole operation had been a colossal waste of time and resources, built on lies and assumptions rooted in stereotypes. When the whistleblower's testimony became public, outrage erupted. News outlets picked up the story, condemning the misuse of taxpayer money and calling for systemic reforms. Politicians weighed in, promising investigations and policy changes. Even members of the police force who hadn't been directly involved expressed disgust, acknowledging that the incident highlighted larger issues within the department. As the scandal dominated headlines, Marcus found himself reflecting on the irony of it all. The officers had entered his life assuming guilt where none existed, destroying something precious in the process. Now their actions had destroyed their own reputations, careers, and trust in the institution they served. Was it coincidence? Or was it something more profound, a reminder that every choice carries consequences? Despite everything, Marcus refused to let bitterness consume him. Instead, he focused on channeling his energy into positive change. With Lisa's help, he organized town hall meetings to discuss ways to improve relationships between law enforcement and the community. He invited experts to speak about implicit bias, accountability, and transparency. Slowly but surely, conversations shifted from anger toward solutions. During this time, Marcus also found comfort in small victories. A local artist painted a mural of Diesel on the side of a downtown building, capturing the dog's loyal spirit in vibrant colors. Students from a nearby school wrote essays about justice and fairness, inspired by Marcus's courage. And every day, strangers stopped by the memorial site on his farm to leave flowers, notes, and tokens of remembrance. Each gesture reminded Marcus that Diesel's legacy lived on, not just in memories but in the hearts of everyone touched by his story. One afternoon, as Marcus stood near Diesel's memorial tree, he noticed a familiar face among the visitors. It was Sarah, the neighbor who had first rallied support after Diesel's death. She approached him hesitantly, holding a small wooden box. "I know it's not much," she said softly, "but I thought you might like this." Inside the box was a tiny carved figurine of a German shepherd, its tail wagging playfully. Tears welled up in Marcus's eyes as he accepted the gift. "Thank you," he whispered, clutching it tightly. "This means more than you know." Sarah smiled sadly. "Diesel was special to all of us. We'll never forget him, or what you've done to honor him." Her words stayed with Marcus long after she left. They reminded him that fighting for justice wasn't just about holding others accountable. It was about creating a world where tragedies like Diesel's death wouldn't happen again. It was about teaching empathy, fostering understanding, and building bridges instead of walls. By the time night fell, Marcus felt a renewed sense of purpose. He returned to the farmhouse, lit a lantern, and opened his journal. For months he had been writing down thoughts, reflections, and ideas for the future. Tonight he added a new entry. "Karma isn't about revenge, it's about balance. What happened to Diesel broke me, but it also showed me the power of standing up for what's right. Change doesn't happen overnight, but every step forward matters. Together we can make sure no one has to go through what I did." As he closed the journal, Marcus glanced out the window at the star-filled sky. Somewhere beyond the horizon he imagined Diesel running free across endless fields, his tail held high and his spirit unbroken. Though grief still lingered, Marcus knew he wasn't alone. Diesel's memory would guide him just as it had guided the movement inspired by his loss. Months had passed since Diesel's death, and though the pain of losing him still lingered in Marcus's heart, he found ways to carry on. The journey hadn't been easy. There were days when grief felt overwhelming, moments when anger threatened to consume him, but Marcus refused to let bitterness take root. Instead, he poured his energy into creating something meaningful out of tragedy. He vowed that Diesel's memory would live on, not just as a reminder of loss, but as a beacon of hope for others. The whistleblower's testimony had ignited widespread outrage, forcing authorities to launch a formal investigation into the botched operation. While the outcome remained uncertain, progress was undeniable. Calls for police reform grew louder, with community leaders, activists, and even some lawmakers joining forces to push for change. Town hall meetings became regular occurrences where people openly discussed issues like racial profiling, implicit bias, and accountability within law enforcement. Marcus attended every session, sharing his story and urging others to speak up. But beyond policy changes, Marcus focused on building connections. He knew that true healing required more than new rules. It demanded empathy, understanding, and trust. To foster those qualities, he started hosting events at his farm. Every weekend, families from the town and surrounding areas gathered for what Marcus called community days. Kids played games in the fields, adults shared meals under makeshift tents, and everyone took turns planting trees or tending to gardens. It was a way to bring people together, to remind them that despite their differences, they all shared a common humanity. One of these trees, a young oak standing tall near the edge of the property, was dedicated to Diesel. Visitors often stopped by to tie ribbons or leave notes around its base. Over time, the tree became a symbol of resilience, a testament to the power of love and loyalty. For Marcus, it served as both a memorial and a promise to honor Diesel's life by continuing to fight for justice. As spring turned into summer, Marcus decided to take his advocacy a step further. With help from Lisa and her organization, he established the Diesel Legacy Foundation, a nonprofit aimed at educating communities about police accountability and supporting victims of systemic injustices. The foundation offered workshops, legal resources, and counseling services for those affected by similar tragedies. Its mission statement read simply, "To create a world where no one suffers because of prejudice or unchecked authority." The response was overwhelming. Donations poured in from across the country, and volunteers signed up to assist with programs. Schools invited Marcus to speak about the importance of standing up against injustice, while artists created murals, songs and poems inspired by Diesel's story. Everywhere Marcus went, he saw evidence of the impact his fight had made. People who had once felt powerless now believed they could make a difference, and many credited Marcus for inspiring them. Still, Marcus never forgot the personal cost of his activism. There were nights when he sat alone in the barn, staring at old photos of Diesel, wondering if he could have done more to protect him. Sometimes he replayed the events of that fateful evening in his mind, questioning whether there had been any way to prevent the tragedy. But then he remembered Diesel's unwavering loyalty, his boundless courage, and his ability to sense danger before it arrived. Those traits weren't just characteristics of a dog. They were lessons Marcus had learned from him. And those lessons kept him moving forward. One day, as Marcus worked in the fields, he noticed a group of children playing near Diesel's memorial tree. They laughed and chased each other, their joy infectious. One little girl approached him shyly, holding a drawing she had made. It depicted a farmer standing beside a German shepherd, surrounded by flowers and sunshine. At the bottom, she had written in shaky letters, "Thank you for being brave." Marcus knelt down to her level, smiling through tears. "This is beautiful," he said softly. "Thank you for reminding me why we're doing this." By the end of the year, the Diesel Legacy Foundation had grown into a national movement. Chapters sprang up in cities across the country, each working to address local issues related to police misconduct and systemic inequality. Marcus traveled extensively, speaking at conferences, meeting survivors of injustice, and collaborating with organizations fighting for reform. His quiet demeanor and heartfelt speeches resonated deeply with audiences, earning him recognition as a leader in the movement. Back home, however, Marcus stayed grounded. Despite the accolades and media attention, he remained committed to the simple life he had always known. Each morning he woke up early to tend to his crops and animals, finding peace in the rhythm of the land. Diesel's absence was still felt, but so too was his presence. In the rustling leaves of the memorial tree, in the laughter of visitors, in the stories people told about how his life had inspired theirs. On the anniversary of Diesel's death, Marcus organized a special ceremony at the farm. Hundreds of people attended, filling the fields with light and warmth. Lanterns were lit, songs were sung, and stories were shared. As the sun set, casting golden hues across the horizon, Marcus addressed the crowd one last time. "Diesel wasn't just my dog, he was family," Marcus began, his voice steady despite the lump in his throat. "He taught me what it means to be loyal, to stand by someone no matter what. When they took him away from me, I thought I'd lost everything. But then I realized something important. Diesel isn't gone. His spirit lives on in all of us, in the work we're doing, in the changes we're making, in the love we share." Applause erupted, followed by cheers and tears. As the crowd dispersed, Marcus lingered near Diesel's tree, watching the lanterns flicker in the breeze. He thought about how far he had come since that terrible night, the friendships he had forged, the lives he had touched, the legacy he had built. It wasn't the path he had chosen, but it was the one he had embraced with every ounce of strength he possessed. In the months and years that followed, Marcus continued advocating for justice, knowing the fight was far from over. But he also allowed himself moments of rest, moments of gratitude. He planted more trees, welcomed more visitors, and cherished the memories of Diesel that lingered in every corner of the farm. For Marcus, Diesel's death had been a turning point, not just in his own life, but in the lives of countless others. It had sparked conversations, inspired action, and brought people together in ways he never imagined possible. Though the scars of that night would always remain, so too would the lessons it taught him. That even in the darkest times, courage can shine. That love transcends loss, and that one life, whether human or animal, can leave an indelible mark on the world. And so, Marcus carried on, guided by the memory of a faithful dog who had changed everything.